It is week 2, Tuesday of week 2, and we've spent another long day in the courtroom listening to testimonies from various officers, whether they be special agents with the FBI or Oregon State Police. I have a few things here that I want to share with you. I've taken some notes, so pardon me if I do read a little bit. One of the first things that was interesting to note was that it was testified that Agent Astorita knocked Ryan Bundy's hat off his head after he had been arrested. Why? Why would you do that? But then I also remembered when that testimony was given that in the video later on, when they go to attend to my husband, they throw the hat or kick the hat off his head. I need to go back and watch it to know whether they threw it or kicked it, because you can literally see the hat flying into the snow across, about probably 6 foot. So I found that very disturbing when I watched that the first time, and now to hear that this particular agent who's on trial knocked the hat off Ryan Bundy's head. What's with that? Why the disrespect? Why the anger? Because that shows anger, right? Another thing that came out that I found very interesting was Blue Team Leader Tim Swanson was saying that he did not put any limitations on the agents' interviews or how they were to be conducted, meaning he did not say they couldn't be interviewed with audio. I found that very interesting because they did not allow audio taping of those interviews. Another thing that was testified to at great length today and many other days by all the officers involved was whether or not they saw casings on the ground. And we had many officers today and a couple of other days testify, and when I say many, 4, testify that they did see brass casings on the ground. And I'm going to try to describe to you where they saw those casings. It was in the triangle of the roadblock. And what I mean by that is you have 2 cars in front forming a V. You have 1 car across the back, which, makes a little triangle of space inside those 3 vehicles. And each time the officers have testified to the fact that they found those casings within that space, that triangle of area of space within those vehicles. One officer, when testifying in reference to the casings, he said he walked through there, because it was ongoing. So he walked through from point A to point B that he was testifying about to do one task after another. Noticed as he walked through that particular area that there were like 40 rounds or more of non-lethal casings on the ground, but he specifically remembered seeing 2 to 3 brass casings laying in the same vicinity as all those non-lethal rounds in that triangle of space that I just described. And what is even more interesting is he testifies to the fact that when he walks back to return to the other side of the crime investigative scene, he noticed that all the non-lethal rounds are piled up in a pile. All 40 to 50 casings are piled up like a kid, sorting things out. But the 2 to 3 brass casings that he saw while he was going through there the first time were gone, were missing. There were 2 or 3 officers that testified to seeing the casings but then not seeing them later. So I find that very interesting, a Houdini trick. It disappeared. It disappeared. And nobody knows who, nobody knows who did it, nobody has a clue. Another officer testified today that when he attended LaVoy and was over there after LaVoy had been killed, he saw a bullet underneath LaVoy. When he went to turn LaVoy's body, he saw a bullet there. I want that explored more. You know, what kind of bullet? What was it doing there? You know. Another point that was brought out in testimony by one of the officers, and we had quite a few officers today. They were quick testimonies, so there were quite a few of them. He was testifying about the first non-lethal round that was shot. It was at the traffic stop, the initial traffic stop, where Ryan Payne and my husband are putting their hands out of the window, showing them that they aren't armed, right? If you remember that. Well, then a shot is popped off, and what this officer is testifying to is that he was negotiating with Ryan Payne, and Ryan Payne was getting ready to surrender, and an Oregon State police officer shot off a non-lethal round which hit the truck, and which then scared the occupants inside, and they retreated their hands inside, and then there was a lot more commotion that went on. And he said that particular shot angered him because it was not necessary. They didn't need to shoot that. He was angry at the OSP officer and said, "What the F that? You know, what's that?" And he says that is the reason why it was escalated. That bullet there, that non-lethal round, escalated the whole incident. I agree. I agree. They shouldn't have. They had done nothing wrong at that first stop. They had not been threatening in any way for anybody to pop off a shot, right? But they're pretty lethal in the way that they handle things. A lot of the agents today were very robotic. I was quite taken back with that. Some of them were not as robotic, but oh my goodness, there were a couple that, you know, I was quite taken back with how they were past feeling. Does that make sense? You know, past feeling, where somebody's so cold and hard that they're past feeling. Another interesting tidbit, I was grateful that this agent testified to the training that these officers receive. And he says, and specifically the prosecution and the defense were asking this officer whether or not operators remember how many shots they fire off. And his testimony, because he was a trainer and a supervisor, and his testimony was it's pretty normal for an operator not to remember how many shots he fires. And he says, well, if that's the case, you know, how can anybody know, right? And he says, well, that's the reason why we changed protocol to include that we wear body cams so that we could rely on the video to help bring the truth out, right? But in this case, what did they do? They actually ordered no body cams, no video, no audio. That was the FBI. So from the beginning, what was it that they wanted to hide? What was it that they wanted us not to know about? What was it that they had planned to do that they didn't want any evidence of? And that's my question. You know, I've talked to some people, and they've talked about how they geared up the hospital and took over the hospital and had, you know, lots of blood going in and controlled, you know, the nurses within there, and regulated the medications, locked them up, and they were expecting a bloodbath, right? They were expecting to kill that night. Let that sink in. Also, we got to watch some video, after dark video. So then you have the night vision, or the planes are picking up the heat sensors on the ground, which are human bodies. You can see the incident where it's still, there's nobody walking around, and then all of a sudden you start to see one officer out there walking in that triangle area, looking. And then he bends down and he gets back up and he continues to look, and he bends down and he picks up. And then a couple of other officers join him and they continue the search within that triangle area. So what was he picking up? Why was he disturbing this scene, which is supposed to be secured by them? How can we trust our law enforcement if they don't follow their own rules by securing a weapon in the appropriate way, by admitting that they shot their weapon, and by not disturbing what might be there at the scene? How can we ever trust them? I wish that if there was an officer that knew what happened that night, that he would have the integrity to testify about it. Because what I'm watching is a bunch of good old boys trying to cover each other. That's how it comes across. And it saddens me greatly. I also learned something else today. I learned a little bit about myself. We were on break and we were talking about some different things, and they were hard things about LaVoy and the autopsy, which I have purposely, not read, because I don't want to. I guess I want to close that off and not deal with it, right? So that's what I've done for 2.5 years, and I learned that I better allow the grieving process to take place, so I'm not continually in the same place. And it's been a really good day in court. The judge is on top of it. It's interesting to watch him keep control of his courtroom and have things flow the way they need to. And I'm grateful to all of you who continue to support us and to buoy us up and to be there in the courtroom with me, helping us to keep the notes and press forward with our case at the wrongful death. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contributions. It's greatly needed, and I'm grateful to you all. God bless. See you tomorrow.